doctrine of grace. These ministers of unrighteousness, these merchants of unrighteousness, have lied and stolen so much of the truth out of what the Scriptures have actually said, that 95% of the people who call themselves Christians today are in total error and apostasy. They don't even know it. And that's why it's called apostasy. That's why it's called deception. Because you don't know you're in it. It's so good. If you knew you were being deceived, you wouldn't be deceived. But as you start to pray for the truth in all things, and you ask the Lord, Father, reveal the truth in all things to me, and ask Him that daily, He will start to lead you into these truths one by one, exactly as He has shown me, and exactly as He has shown many, many others that I hear from all the time. And there's such a division, even amongst my emails. I can always tell who are the ones the Lord is leading and guiding and working with, and who are the ones that are still full of institutional religion. Because that's all the churches are today. Institutional religion, under mind control of the errors and apostasies that their parents were taught, that their parents were taught, that have been handed down. They haven't broken out of the mold. They haven't broken out of the box and said, wait a minute, something's wrong with all this. And in their spirits, you know that something's wrong with this. I never met anybody who even attended Sunday churches weekly, and I did most of my life, who didn't still feel they were missing something, that something wasn't wrong. And so why do you just keep repeating the error week after week after week, and then put your children through the same thing? Break out of the box. Start asking the Lord, why do I feel this way? What is the truth in all things? Teach me the truth in all things. I guarantee you, one of the first things He will show you is exactly what He has shown me and so many others, is that the churches are breaking the very own commandments they teach, they profess, and keep, that they're not honoring the Sabbath day, which is Saturday, and then He will lead you into all the other apostasies and doctrines that they're teaching that are false. You know, and I've had people ask me, how do you know His name is Yahushua? And I said, well, I just asked Him. I just learned how to hear His small, still voice that speaks to your spirit, and asked Him what His name was, what His Son's name was. He said Yahushua. And so you can get online and do research, and there's all these websites that have all the historical stuff, the legalistic and technical stuff about how they found in antiquity His name's Yahushua and blah, blah, blah. I never went through all that. I just asked the Lord Himself. And I like to use those websites as confirmations, though, because the Lord always confirms what He tells you. He's not going to tell you one thing and not tell anybody else that. The Lord's the same yesterday, today, and forever. All the truths are His. He doesn't just give them to one person. I'm not the only person here who can hear the Lord's voice. We all have the Holy Spirit. If you've accepted this new covenant that He has given us, and you've accepted Him as your Mashiach, your Messiah, and you walk in His ways, you are filled with His Spirit, and you can learn to hear His small voice. Because that's just part of being filled with the Spirit. It's not just a one-way communication. And that's one thing you'll never learn from the churches today. It's one thing I never learned in 30 years, is how to really have a relationship with the Lord, because they don't teach you that. They'll teach you you're filled with the Spirit, and then there's certain denominations that'll take that for a mile, twist it, pervert it, turn it upside down. And you know who I'm talking about, the Pentecostals and the tongue speakers. But we all have the Holy Spirit within us, and we all have the ability to hear His still small voice in our spirits. It's not just something He gives to one person. He will anoint people, certain particular people that He has chosen to stand up and become mouthpieces for Him. But that does not mean that the 95% of the other people cannot hear His voice and must go to one person to hear what the Lord's saying. It doesn't work that way anymore, folks. We all have His Holy Spirit. And one of the biggest things I'm finding is Sabbath day keepers will be the fastest ones to be able to learn how to hear His voice. It actually is a step. It's a learning process. Because Satan talks to your head. The Lord speaks to your heart. And it just seems to me that those who honor His seventh-day Sabbath are the quickest to realize when He is speaking to them, because they can hear it in their hearts and their spirits. And He will teach them that. He will lead them into that. So you start to honor the things that He says, then He is going to be able to work more with you, reveal more of Himself to you. You know, the Lord can't speak to somebody who's standing in front of him and got the door shut and is screaming through the door, teach me, Lord. You got to open the door. You got to be accessible for him. You got to be available for him to even reach you. You can't tell the Lord, teach me what the truth is, and then argue with him over what the truth is. Or you're going to tell him what the truth is. Oh, that's not right. That's not what I was told. That's not what my pastor says. I love this one. That's not what my husband says. Are we in like the Stone Ages or what? You know, I realize that there was probably an antiquity time where the husbands were more pious than their wives were, spent more time studying the Word, whatever. But if you think I'm going to put my faith and my salvation and my eternal security in the hands of what my husband thinks, are you crazy? You know, people need to take responsibility for their own beliefs. Every single person has their own relationship with the Lord. What are you going to do when you stand in the judgment seat and he wants to know why you stayed in your errors, you never sought truth, you never sought him for the truth? You're going to say, well, it's because of my husband. You don't think that as an excuse. You got to think for yourselves, people. You know, I hate this whole thing about you know, Paul's teachings that have done so much to divide the churches. I love what the Lord told my translator who does my websites. Told her to take the KJV, staple all of Paul's books together, and don't read them. So much easier than doing the totally unthinkable, as maybe tearing pages out of the Bible or whatever. Just staple his books together and don't read them. You know, read the Lord's books, the words in red. Not his books, but the words in red are his. And James and John, because there's a lot of people that don't even believe that those books from Peter. Peter wrote about 14 books. And the two that are in the KJV are questionable that they're even his. They believe Luke wrote them or Paul and put Peter's name on them. So a lot of, you know, if you really want the real books that should have been in the KJV, they're sitting in the vault of the Vatican because Constantine made sure they'd never get in the KJV. There's a little smidgen of truth there amongst all of the erroneous translations and the errors. And just like the Garden of Eden, the Lord's sitting there and testing his people. If you really read the Bible, like we're commanded to read it, but to fellowship with him and get to know him. I've read the Bible umpteen times. I'll tell you what, about the fourth time through was like, what is this? Why is it so different? It's almost like, okay, the Old Testament is totally one thing. And then you get to the New Testament, and all of a sudden there's two different Gospels there. There's Jesus and what the apostles taught, and then boom, here comes Paul. And I'm not going to talk about Paul today. That's a whole totally separate teaching. But he was an enemy of the Lord's. He never changed. I have a website on it, justgivemethetruth.com. There's an excellent book out on it that you can get PDF email form, Blueprint for Bondage. But he was a snake, an enemy of the camp. Bible code says he was indwelled by Cain. I've always said he was serpent seed. And found it in the Bible codes the other day, and I just thought, another confirmation. But I already have all these codes on Paul anyway at hiddencodes.com. So, you know, you can give some people so much truth. They either accept they accept what's there or they don't. Adding more and more and more and more on, I don't know if it does any good or not. How much confirmation and proof do you need to realize that Paul was a government infiltrator, led the church straight to the RCC, to Constantine to take a hold of? They all were out of the same Mithra society, the Mason society of that time. It just goes way back. And the only way you're really going to grasp it, if you can't grasp it by now, and you've gone through the material about Paul, is just to ask the Lord to reveal the truth in all